There's something about garden tour videos that we all seem to like. I like watching them, you like watching them, and I've been asked by many of you to give a tour of my garden. So that's what I'm doing today. Join me as I share my front yard and my back vegetable garden and tell you what I'm doing and what I plan to do. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and I am more than glad to share my gardens with you. I'm particularly proud of what I've accomplished in 2 years. This is the 2-year anniversary of when I moved into this house. So everything you see, everything I'm about to show you, I've put in place in just the last 2 years. And that's one of the reasons I think we like watching the tour videos, because we can get an idea of what someone else has done and maybe how long it took them to accomplish it. When I moved into this house 2 years ago, I knew there was a lot of work to be done because the people that had lived here before didn't do much to maintain the landscape. This tree had some serious damage, and so I needed to bring it down, which opened up this whole space. It also revealed that pretty much everything growing on that half of the yard was dead. It hadn't been watered in years, apparently. Everything on this side was mostly dead. There was a big slope, pretty steep, so what was here was washing away. I went ahead and decided that I would need to terrace the landscape and build some low walls so that this area would be mostly flat for the plants I put in. I built this retaining wall and leveled the area above it. And now I've got some peonies that are just getting ready to pop. There's some nice evergreens in here. In the shadows are the salvia. I really love salvia. It's a plant that attracts a lot of beneficial insects and blooms through most of the season. I've got some daylilies. These actually need to be divided because they grew so well last year. I have a little small teacup rose. I've got some irises that are just now starting to bloom. I've got some grasses in this area. I like the height of the ornamental grasses, and these get about 4 feet tall. Right next to them, to add different color and texture, I have lamb's ear and then a comfrey plant. And last year I started putting in some ground covers, and so that's one of the things that I'll be adding throughout the garden is ground cover to cover up some of this mulch area. But I really like the way that this upper garden is starting to look, and as these plants become more mature, it's really going to look even better. I planted some California poppies in this space last year, let them flower and go to seed, and a lot of those seeds have germinated and are starting to fill out this space. And this is a Shasta daisy, and so with the white flowers of the Shasta daisy and the orange of the California poppies, this is one of my favorite areas when everything's in bloom in this upper garden. I didn't finish building the wall for this middle section until last year, but I did start putting plants in the first year to include some plants I knew would take a while to grow, like this currant. I put it in at the end of the first season, so now it's 1.5 years old and it's covered with flowers that will give me some delicious currants later in the season. I also, among the very first plants, put in the daffodils and the tulips. They're starting to fade as the weather warms up, but this whole area is covered by daffodils, and it's so nice early in the season to have that splash of color in a pretty wide area of this garden bed. I've got a smaller space with the tulips, but they too were a great way to start the season. And so because the tulips did so well this year, I'm going to go ahead and find some other pockets throughout this area to add tulips. Last year I put in these daylilies and the salvia. So between the daylilies and the salvia, this is going to be an area filled with color. I also put in these sedge along this driveway edge last year. Now, I normally like to clean up my grasses and my sedge in the spring, but the rabbits really like these plants. So I leave the dried leaves on to allow the green new growth to pop through so the rabbits don't eat it. Also in this bed, I've got some comfrey, which is really doing great. It's about to flower. I like ornamental grasses, and so at the back of this bed, there's some more grasses that'll grow tall, or daylilies. To add some color and texture and variety, there's a 9-bark and some euonymus. There's a silverberry right there. For color, I've got monarda. And then last year I put in some iris, and the iris is already starting to bloom. So it's going to look great here in just a little bit. I also divided up some of the upper daylilies last year and put these into place, so they'll be flowering soon. Around the trunk of this cut down tree, I've got some clematis. I actually have some oriental poppies over here, nice big red flower. Here's some echinacea, a purple coneflower that I put in last year. One of these actually flowered, so this year I'm looking forward to a lot of flowers. And then I just put in these Shasta daisies. So again, I like the contrast. So I'll have the white of the Shasta daisies against the purple of the coneflower, the red of the poppies. And then in this space where the daffodils are now, I'll start marking out where I can put in some more flowers, perennials and annuals, so that when the daffodils are gone, this area isn't bare, but it's filled with color. I started working on this lower section last year by putting rocks in place as a nice visual anchor. I put in some yarrow, I've got some gaillardia. Just this year, I added the creeping vinca ground cover, which will gradually fill this area and hopefully start spilling over the wall. This is an area that's xeric. It isn't going to require a lot of water. So while I water the upper section more regularly, this section I'm specifically choosing the type of plants that can survive and look good without much water. That includes plants like this salvia and chamomile that I spread in this area and allowed to reseed, along with some new plants that I grew this year indoors, some different yarrow that I've placed all around this lower section as well. On this other side, this is this year's big project where I'm reclaiming from all of these weeds by putting in cardboard, covering that with soil, and then covering it with wood chips. And so I've already started the seed of 4 different types of sunflower in this area, and I'm really looking forward to all the different sizes and colors of the sunflower. And then from here, we start heading back into the backyard where the lilacs are in bloom and starting to look good. And this area of the garden is still another year or 2 away from development. But now I can focus in on some of the areas that you're probably familiar with in my videos. I'm really happy with the way this area is starting to develop. I put the fountain in before I had any plants, and now the plants are starting to surround the space. I've got salvia right here. I've got some lavender up front. I've got some honeysuckle that's going to be climbing up these little bell trellises. And then all the plants behind me have been added since just the end of last season. I spent a good amount of time last year filling this whole space with the wood chips so that I wouldn't have to deal with the weeds this year, and also to help with the watering. I put in some of the flowers that I had in my winter sowing, and then added some cosmos that I started indoors. This is the circular bed that I built recently. It has some stinging nettle in there, and this is where I put the pink dandelion seeds. I have borage over here, which is a great plant for attracting pollinators. And then this space over here, I've got calendula, Shasta daisies, and then on the other side of my little fruit tree, I've got some more lavender. And then this is an area that I really like. This year, I put in some brand new black raspberry plants. Last season, I put in these yellow raspberry plants. And then the year before, the very first year of this garden area, I put in these red raspberries. So this is my raspberry garden with 3 different colors. And there's also a bee balm monarda growing right here. The asparagus just went in last year as well, and these plants are only in the ground for a year but doing very well. As a ground cover in this whole space, I've got strawberries. So I'm looking forward to all of this being covered by strawberries because I'll allow the runners to go ahead and root. This currant bush was one of the very first plants I put into the garden, and it's doing great. Just like the one in front, it's covered with blossoms, and I'm looking forward to maybe making some currant jelly this year. I've got another comfrey plant, more currants, and then I've got some gooseberries that are doing okay. I just put them in this last year. They came through the winter without too much trouble. Last year I also put in some butterfly weed, and it made it through the winter. It's coming back as well, so that'll be a nice splash of color. These strawberries I put in last year. This is a Cavendish strawberry, and these plants are looking wonderful. They've already flowered, and I'm hoping to have some fruit set on these strawberries soon. And then on the other side of the arch, I have a different type of strawberry. This is Quinault strawberries. They're also doing very well. And I've left some hairy vetch growing in this bed. It's starting to interfere with the strawberries, but I'll let it grow and probably flower to collect seed. I've had trouble. I planted some grapevines in this bed, and it's coming back. But we've had such terrible weather with early freezes in the fall and late freezes in the spring that I'm not sure that this grape's going to do well. So I'm going to look in other areas, I think, to do my grapes. I also have some butterfly weed on this side that's starting to grow. And then again, I've got the little gooseberry plants and currants in this bed, along with my rhubarb, which is really doing well. This is just the second year for the rhubarb, and the plants are looking great. I won't harvest until next year, so I'm letting them grow. These flowers actually do attract some pollinators, and the bees will feed on them. And then I've got more comfrey in this bed as well. So it's starting to fill in pretty nicely, along with the other asparagus bed that I have. The plants are doing great. My horseradish is doing great. I have another currant down here that is starting to come back strong. Mint. And then one of my herb beds. And these are perennial herbs, and they all came back fine through the winter. This is the area of my garden, my vegetable garden, that you're probably most familiar with through my videos, because I do most of my filming in this general area. We had a really cold freeze at the end of April that actually killed a lot of the plants that I had started early. So I'm recovering from that. But all the garlic came back well, and you'll be seeing a lot more of these beds and what I'm growing in videos to come. I'll be planting some cucumbers and melons, I think, to take advantage of this trellis in this concrete block bed. But I've also got some strawberries and some chamomile and some thyme growing in the squares around the border of this bed. So it's pretty good. Most of these I didn't even do this year. This is all from last year, and they came back pretty well. This is the big project that I started working on the middle of last year and just finished building last month, but there's still a lot of work to be done. The soil finally got warm enough that I could put some tomato plants in just the last couple days. In this front part of the bed, this is the south side that gets the most sun, I'll be putting pepper plants in. But I've been monitoring the soil temperature and it's still not warm enough. We had such a cool and wet May that it's taking a long time for the soil to warm up. And then as I finish filling the beds, I'll be adding a lot more plants to include eggplant, melon. I'll be putting more tomatoes along this back bed. This area is completely enclosed to try to keep the rabbits out, because this is my in-ground bed and this is where I don't want the rabbits to get. So in this space I'll be putting melons and popcorn and other low plants that the rabbits would probably love to eat. But as you might imagine, this big bed space has more than doubled what I was able to do last year with these raised beds. I have all of my potatoes growing in these black grow bags, and I've already got some fruit bushes in these 4 beds. There'll be a pergola above me. Once the cost of lumber comes down, I can probably complete it. But I went ahead and put these plants in because I don't want to wait on this structure. I've got gooseberries in this bed, and this is one that I put in last year along with a partner that didn't make it through the winter. And I went ahead and got 2 more and put these plants in a little over a week ago. And then in this bed over here, I've got honeyberries, and I put all of these honeyberry plants in at the same time. So they're just a couple weeks old in this garden. In this bed I've got aronia. I put 4 plants in. 3 of them came back okay from the winter, but the rabbits apparently love aronia. So I had to cover them with wire, and they're just barely starting to grow again. So hopefully I'll be able to get the aronia growing in this area, but if not, I hate to say it, but I might have to buy new plants. And then I put in these currants last year, and they're coming back pretty well as too. So I'm pleased with this area. I've got goji berries growing in this bed, 2 different types, and then in between, also as another ground cover, I've got Mer du Bois strawberries that I just put in this year as well. I spent a lot of time and effort last year putting down about a 6-inch layer of wood chips in this area, and you can see there's very few, just a couple weeds that are popping up, so that's really worked well. And also the soil underneath here is starting to be improved as this wood chip mulch decomposes, and so my fruit trees are actually liking it pretty well. That late freeze that we had in April, it got down to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, did a number on this tree. So it was just starting to bud out. I'm not sure that these upper branches are going to recover, so I'm probably going to be left with some pruning and encouragement of these few leaves that are remaining. I did add a couple more currant bushes in this section, and I'll be doing the same all the way around in this area as I develop it into a food forest, adding more of those fruit bushes that I like. And this is another tree that didn't make it through the winter. It's alive, but that freeze was enough to just devastated as it was setting buds. My little espalier apple tree is doing great. Last year I put in a little rustic border and I put in some vertical supports. So very soon now I'll actually start running some wires to begin training the tree. I have plants growing in my green stock vertical planter, and I have a whole bunch of plants that are hardening off and will go in the ground soon, in addition to a number of plants downstairs in my grow room that need to be brought up to harden off. This is just my second full season, and I'm looking forward to getting a lot of plants in the ground and growing out some of the new beds. It's come a long ways in just 2 years. Thanks for all of your support watching Gardener Scott videos. I look forward to making many more. And now would be a good time to subscribe if you haven't already, and click on the bell so you know when those videos are coming out every week. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.